Welcome to the Selah episode of the Christian Men at Work podcast. We're in between my interviews with Christian men. I talk about 5 things. S is something on my heart. E is an example of faith at work. L is logos, or a passage from Scripture related to work. A is an announcement. And H is a handy tip to help you be more effective at your work. Men at Work, welcome to episode 150, which is Selah episode 55. Today I want to share with you 10 common logical fallacies that everyone should know. And this is from a website called Fallacies-Selah55-CMAW150. And my friend Damon shared this with me, and I thought it was very cool. I've heard some of the terms from this article, but I've never heard them really analyzed in this way. So I'm going to read parts of this article, and then I'm going to insert my comments at different places. But let me just start with the beginning. Have you ever lost an argument even though you knew you were right? There is a high chance that your opponent was, either deliberately or unknowingly, using logical fallacies to defeat you. Oh, and just let me insert here that the author of this article is Paul Elsher, E-L-S-H-E-R. Continuing on, more often than not, these flaws in reasoning play a role in arguments. They may be committed unintentionally due to a lack of argumentation skills. However, they are frequently used as a persuasion strategy for one's personal advantage. For instance, in domains such as politics and advertising, logical fallacies are used skillfully to influence the audience's opinion and behavior. Understanding how fallacies work and knowing how to spot them in a discussion can be a useful skill for almost anyone. It can lead to personal empowerment by helping you to form better, more persuasive arguments, as well as defend yourself from people who wish to influence your thinking in a way that may be against your best interests. So let me just insert here what drew my attention to this was as it would apply to apologetics and evangelism, but also just there's so many lies in this world right now. It's just maddening sometimes. These tools, I think, are really useful to help recognize the tools that are being used against us, primarily in the media, but in many areas of our life. So let's get right to the list. The first one is called ad hominem. And this is an abusive attack against someone making an argument instead of addressing the argument itself. This is one of the most common logical fallacies and often the bread and butter of political debates and campaigns. This offender occurs when someone attacks directly the person making an argument rather than criticizing the argument itself. In other words, one replaces logical argumentation with attacks directed towards their opponent's personal qualities, such as their character, background, intelligence, morals. And although I've voted for Donald Trump and used to be a big Trump fan, he clearly used this technique a lot, where he would just rip on people. A couple of examples they have. You didn't even finish high school. How could you possibly know about this? So again, it's just diverting away from the argument by just belittling someone. Number 2, straw man. The straw man occurs when someone attacks a distorted version of the original argument that they have themselves created. In other words, the straw man. In fact, they attack an argument that the opponent doesn't really hold in order to ridicule or disprove their claims. The argument goes like this. Person A makes a claim. Person B creates a distorted version of the claim. And person B attacks the distorted version. The distorted version is unrelated or only remotely related to the original claim and may be oversimplified, exaggerated, taken out of context, or focus only on a specific aspect of the argument. This is also commonly used in politics and debates on controversial topics. So here's an example. Jim says, I think our company should allocate a larger portion of the budget to customer support. It's clearly lacking behind other areas. Andy replies, we'll go bankrupt if we spend all our money on customer support. So the point is, Jim didn't say we should spend all their money on customer support. So it's basically misrepresenting what somebody said and then attacking the misrepresentation. So next is number 3, appeal to authority. Appeal to authority works by claiming that something must be true because it is backed up by someone who is at least allegedly an authority on the subject. Although an appeal to authority is by no means always unfounded, it can be misused. If all someone does to support their arguments is to appeal to a figure of authority, and without providing sufficient evidence that the authorities are correct, it quickly becomes fallacious. Appeal to false authority is a more specific variation of this fallacy. As the name suggests, it refers to the use of incompetent or irrelevant authorities. Practically any celebrity endorsement in advertising could be considered as an appeal to false authority, and that is obviously something we're all very familiar with, in a way that this is used a lot. But, I mean, you can think of other examples where, in today's age, we appeal to authority like the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court made a decision like Roe v. Wade, people make the argument that it's logical just because they are an authority. Okay, next is slippery slope. This logical fallacy occurs when someone argues without providing adequate evidence that a certain action or proposition will lead to an undesirable outcome via a series of events. This slippery slope fallacy, also known as absurd extrapolation, works by moving an argument from a sensible premise to an undesirable or extreme conclusion via a number of steps. The first seemingly unimportant event is suggested to lead to a more significant event, which leads to an even more significant event, etc. So the form is, if A then B, if B then C, if C then ultimately X. The conclusion of the argument or the culmination of the chain of events is seen as unacceptable, and therefore it is argued that the first decision or action must be rejected. So one example used here is legalizing prostitution would cause more marriages to break up, which would cause the breakdown of families, which would finally result in the destruction of civilization. Number 5, the bandwagon. The bandwagon fallacy, which is especially common in the world of advertising, is based on the assumption that the opinion of the majority is always correct. In other words, if most people do or believe something, it cannot be wrong or incorrect. It's a fallacy because it offers the appeal instead of making a valid argument. It only shows that something is popular without taking into account that people may well be mistaken or deceived. For example, McDonald's has served 100 billion people in the world. It must be the best fast food restaurant. Or everyone is buying the new iPhone that's coming out this weekend. You have to buy it too. And the term, I always love the history behind these words. The name bandwagon comes from the times when politicians used to ride through the streets as part of their political campaigns, and people who supported that politician would jump on their bandwagon. All right, number 6, appeal to ignorance. A lot of these, I had some idea what they were, but when I heard the title of this, I didn't really understand, so let's dig into it. Definition. This logical fallacy occurs when someone claims that a conclusion must be true if it hasn't been proven false, or false if it hasn't been proven true. This logical fallacy is based on the assumption that if we cannot prove something, it must be true or false. That is, an argument must be true if it cannot be proven false, and if it cannot be proven false, it must be true. In reality, appeal to ignorance only succeeds in illustrating one thing, that we don't know something. If such an argument was valid, it could often be applied to support two opposing claims, which is a clue that it is based on flawed reasoning. For example, you cannot prove that ghosts don't exist, therefore they exist, and you cannot prove that ghosts exist, therefore they don't exist. All right, let's go on to number 7, false dilemma. This is another common line of flawed reasoning. It occurs when only two choices that are often extreme opposites are presented as the only possibilities when in fact there are other alternatives. For example, if someone asserts that you either love me or you hate me, they would be committing the false dilemma since there are other possibilities for how people can feel for each other. It's also known as the either-or fallacy, the all-or-nothing fallacy, and the black and white fallacy. I think I've also heard the term a false choice. That's a false choice. So some examples. I didn't see you at the charity fundraiser today. I guess you are not a good person after all. Or we either keep euthanasia illegal and show that we value human life, or we legalize euthanasia and decide that human life is worthless. Some of these you have to think a little bit about because they have a moral implication that kind of confuses the issue, but I understand the point of that one. All right, number 8, hasty generalization. This logical fallacy occurs when someone draws a conclusion based on just a small sample size. In other words, the conclusion is supported by insufficient evidence. So an example is, my friend has been eating only hamburgers, pizzas, and fries for 10 years and he has no health issues. Therefore, fast food is not unhealthy for you. This is also known as faulty generalization. This common offender occurs when a general conclusion is drawn based on a sample size that is too small. In other words, the conclusion is made hastily without looking at a broader range of relevant data and thus lacking sufficient evidence to support it. This fallacy can be tough to overcome because there are often built-in biases involved behind incorrect generalizations and stereotyping. All right, next is the red herring fallacy. You hear about this term a lot, but honestly, I've always been a little confused about what this was, so I thought this was helpful. The red herring is a fallacy that works by derailing the actual issue being discussed to an irrelevant topic. It's a deliberately made diversion, and it is a common strategy used when the topic is disadvantageous or uncomfortable to the arguer. The diversion often seems like it is a valid point or a counter-argument, when in fact it is only a surface relevance to the real issue at hand. And the name of this fallacy apparently refers to a type of herring, a smelly fish that was used to train hunting dogs since its strong smell was well suited for training them to track scents without getting distracted. So here's an example. The daughter says, "I'm so hurt that my boyfriend broke up with me." And the mother says, "Think of all the poor starving children in Africa. Your problems will seem pretty insignificant then." All right, number 10, appeal to tradition. Appeal to tradition occurs when it's claimed that something must be good or true because it has been practiced for a long time, that is, traditionally. Arguments made on this basis are fallacious since the main evidence for them are historical preferences, not relevant facts and logical reasoning. The mere fact that a belief or behavior is traditional does not prove that it must be right or better than its newer alternative. As John Locke, a well-known English philosopher, pointed out, new opinions are always suspected and usually opposed without any other reason but because they are not already common. So people have believed, one example is people have believed the earth is flat for much longer than it is round. For this reason, I choose to believe that the earth is flat. So that is number 10. And again, application of this, there's a lot of applications, but I think it's just a good mental exercise to recognize these and to help us think logically as we're dealing with so many different things in our world today. I am going to, I don't have an example of faith at work today. I do have an L or logos, and that is Proverbs 24:11. Rescue those who are being taken away to death. Hold back those who are stumbling to the slaughter. And that's just a call to evangelism both in the workplace and outside the workplace. That is all I have for this Selah episode. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Love you and God bless.